Hello, welcome back to Lovers of Young Adult Lit. We are your faithful hosts, book nerds, and man friends. If you are a teacher, we have made it. It is the end of the semester. Christmas break is so close, we can almost taste it. So, in continuation of last week's episode, we are carrying on with our top favorite lists of young adult books. Some of us this week are doing top 5 books of all time. Some of us are doing our top favorites from 2020. We hope that you find some gem to read over Christmas break. Maybe you'll find a bunch of gems in this collection of books we're going to present to you this evening. So, my friend Daniel is here, and he wants to talk about a particular special gem of a moment that happened at his school with the book they read with his students. So, Daniel, take it away.
Thank you so much, Katie. You know, when I think about this distance learning, it has been so incredibly hard on our teachers. It's been so incredibly hard on our students. But if you look for the silver linings, they are there. And one silver lining that happened to us was we read a novel called First Rule of Punk by Celia Perez. And it's about a girl who's middle school age, and she is it's a journey of character where she learns to balance her Mexican heritage with her love of punk rock music. And the author Celia Perez, she paid us a visit over Google Meet. And the way that came to be was my wife, who's also our librarian, Stephanie Rowe, she reached out to Celia Perez and arranged the visit. And it was really neat because the students got to talk with her. And it turns out she's actually writing her next novel, and it takes place in New Mexico. So she has our kids answering some questions for her, just doing a little bit of research about Christmas time in New Mexico. She didn't really elaborate too much, but she said it's about a family of wrestlers in New Mexico, luchadores, I'd imagine, but she wasn't really that specific. So it was a really neat, enjoyable experience. And one thing this distance learning has shown us is we have the internet, when we have things like Google Meet and Zoom, the world is very small. And the fact that we can bring authors and students together. And sometimes all it takes is just an email, just a tweet to make it happen. So check out First Rule of Punk by Celia Perez. Now I want to pass us off to Deborah Kincaid. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Daniel. I am one of the few that doesn't have a top 5. I did top 5 last week. So today I'm going to talk about a duology of books that I just finished. So let me show you the screen. Hold on. Technology is my friend. So this is a pair of books by Renee Ahdieh, I think. The Wrath and the Dawn and The Rose and the Dagger. Both of these books came out a few years ago. I think the first one was in 2015 and the second in 2016. But I just found it, so I read it. And I know we're big on, let's stop sharing there. I know we're big on fairy tale retellings in this group. This is not a fairy tale retelling. It's a retelling of the Arabian Nights story of 1001 Nights. And that's where, if you'll remember, a Persian ruler is betrayed by his wife. Sad. So in anger, he takes a virgin as a bride every day and then kills her the next morning so that she won't betray him. Well, one day, Scheherazade, I can never say that, Scheherazade comes along and she offers herself as the next bride, and then she starts telling him a story. And her story is so compelling that the next morning he can't kill her because he wants to hear what comes next. So then he keeps her around for 1,000 nights, and by the 1,001th night, he has fallen in love with her and they live happily ever after. That's the story. So this is a retelling of that story. And instead of Scheherazade, I can never say that, now we have Shatsi. which sounds a little bit like a dog, but it's just a shortened version of the name. There's a little bit more to the story in the retelling. Her motivation for offering herself as a virgin bride is not sacrificial. It's because one of her friends was killed by this ruler and she wants revenge. So she's out to kill him. And of course, he is not what he seems. He's not quite as evil. There's a backstory about why he's killing these brides off. And not to give away any plot twists, but I know you guys could probably figure out that eventually they end up falling in love and she doesn't die and blah, blah, blah. So the parts that I really liked about the book was the Middle Eastern setting. We learn all about the food and the clothing, and there's sultans and there's beautiful horses and falcons, and there's even a flying carpet and some magic. That's all fun. The characters are pretty good, and it kept me engaged. Any book that can keep me engaged into round 2, I'm all over. So I enjoyed it for 2 books. I was kind of glad it didn't go on for 7 books because I think that we would have been tired of it by then. So I liked it. I gave it a 4 out of 5. And I think there's even a movie. When I was looking around, I found a movie trailer for it. So I'll go watch the movie and then I'll report back on that one. So Wrath and the Dawn and Rose and the Dagger duology. So find it. And I'm going to pass it over to my friend Steve.
Good evening, everybody. This week I'm going to talk about my top 5 young adult novels for 2020. Realistic fiction is pretty much my favorite genre in young adult literature. So the 5 books I'm going to talk about are all realistic fiction, but they're from authors of different backgrounds and they tackle different social issues. I mean, they kind of cover the spectrum of, I guess you could say, intersectionality or social issues, which those books kind of speak to me. So book 1, Shout by Laurie Halse Anderson. You all know her from Speak being her one of her early novels and still most popular novels. If you don't know, she herself is a survivor of sexual abuse. And this is pretty amazing. This is sort of like an autobiographical, it's like a memoir really, that focuses on her coming of age story, how she dealt with her abuse and basically ended up being a survivor. And then it does, as you go through the book, towards the end, it gets into her adult time too. And she really, I mean, she's an amazing author, an amazing spokesperson and advocate for, people's rights and survivors and the importance of educating about sexual abuse and stuff like that. And this is just so beautifully told. It's just, like I said, written in verse. And I mean, I tabbed a few pages, but literally every page of this, there's something that just hits you. Untreated pain is a cancer of the soul that can kill you. So this book is really about her healing process, and it's just beautiful. I mean, I picked this thing up and I just read it until I was done. I just could not stop. Book 2, All American Boys, co-authored by Jason Reynolds. Several of us have talked about his other books. He's one of the hottest, most popular authors of young adult lit currently in the United States, and he's doing great things by reaching reluctant readers and going to schools and giving talks. And he is an important figure of our times. And this book has alternating chapters. It's called All American Boys because Jason Reynolds' chapters deal with a African-American teenager who's a victim of police brutality. And Brendan Kiley's chapter deals with sort of the all-American popular jock white boy, if you will, in the same community. And what you have is 2 like opposite ends of the spectrum characters dealing with this event, because the African-American teenager who gets assaulted at a convenience store by a police officer, that's the inciting incident and sets things forward. So it kind of becomes like a survivor story and then like a changing the perspective of the other character's story. And those 2 narratives that go back and forth weave together at the climax. And this is a book that's completely relevant to things that are happening right now. I mean, maybe you've read The Hate U Give and you feel that was a book that was relevant about current social issues. This is another book like that, and I feel it's even more relevant with what has been happening this year with Black Lives Matter movement and stuff like that. So, great book. Book 3, Sunshine is Forever by Kyle T. Kawan, local author. Just great book about Corin, this kid who is dealing with depression. His parents send him to Camp Sunshine, which is a camp for teenagers dealing with depression or have tried to commit suicide, and he refers to it as like Camp Suicide. And he's very, at the beginning of the novel, very reluctant to accept any change or deal with an incident that triggered his depression. And he, befriends the other outcast kid, becomes his friend, but there's a girl, and he sort of falls head over heels for this girl, but she's got her own issues. And, it's just a great, if you're a fan of like John Green or Laurie Halse Anderson, that kind of gritty, realistic fiction, but the characters feel genuine, and this book will make you laugh. It'll touch you, make you feel empathy for the characters. Again, one of those books, you read this in a day or two because you just can't put it down. You just feel like you can connect. And I think the author did a good job of authentically capturing what some young people really face with depression and that topic of suicide. So book 4, Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby Rivera. I know I did a book talk about this one. I also last time did a book talk about the release of the graphic novel. So I'll spend even less time talking about this. It's about young Juliet who comes out to her parents, gets a summer intern job with the feminist writer that she kind of idolizes, but sort of her coming of age story. And she realizes it's just wonderful. It's authentic. It's semi-autobiographical. It's funny. It's witty. I think this is one of the better coming of age queer kind of coming out queer stories that I've read recently. And this book, you feel for Juliet, you care about her, and I think it just serves in lots of ways as like an education about that experience, and here like representing like young queer, like their story, like we've talked about that in this book club over and over again, written by authors outside of what's been like the heteronormative, right? So last book, The Black Flamingo. Oh my God, I flippin' love this book. Dean Atta. Again, this is a coming of age story. It really starts when he is just a little boy and curious and wanting to play with dolls. And it's this whole evolution of him coming to age, coming out, and by the end, becoming the Black Flamingo, which is finding where he feels included and can have his voice and his identity, and that's with the drag community. This book will make you laugh, will make you want to cry. It's just, and it's written sort of in verse form too. So it's just very powerful because it really just cuts the fat and just boom, it really goes right for the heart. Like on page 1, you just feel for our protagonist. And great. Again, another important book, queer story, I believe, and just gives you, when you read deeply into someone's personal experience, this is why I like first narrative personal experience books that are realistic fiction, or this one's kind of semi-autobiographical as well. Basically kind of like a memoir, but certain aspects or characters are fictionalized to make it fit into a book. But it really gives you that, broadens your perspective when you can really see what it's like in someone else's shoes. And that teaches us empathy. And that's one of the great values that reading books provides for us, not just an escape, but to teach us that compassion for everyone. So those are some of the top 5 young adult literature that I read this year. So thank you. I'm going to pass it on to my homegirl, Katie. Take it away.
Oh, hi, constant listener, constant watcher. It's me, your girl, Katie. So, I was thinking this week about what books to talk about tonight because it's our last one of 2020 and our theme was sort of top favorite books. And asking a book nerd to pick their favorite books is like asking a cinephile to pick their favorite movie or a gamer to pick their favorite game. It's impossible. I have a list of 200 plus books that I could call my favorite on any given day of the week. So I narrowed it down a little bit. Some of these I've already talked about in previous book talks. Some of them I have not. So here we go. My first two, when we decided on this theme of top favorite books, were obviously going to be The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Mayer. I know I've talked about this one. These new covers they released over this year, gorgeous. This was the very first fairy tale retelling I ever read, and it set me down the path, the slippery slope that I am on now. So it is a new science fiction futuristic retelling. The first book is of Cinderella, but she's a cyborg named Cinder. The second book is called Scarlet. It's a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood, incorporated in the same world as Cinder. The third book is called Cress. Again, they're all in the same universe. All these characters, by the third and fourth book, they get together to sort of save the world. Cress is the third book. It's about Rapunzel, or a character that's structured after Rapunzel. And the last book is called Winter, structured after Snow White. There are two novellas to fill in the gap. You get a novella about the evil queen and sort of what happened to Lavanna before the novel started. That one's called Fairest. And then there's an epilogue novel, what happens to all the characters after they save the world, called Stars Above. So, Cinder, book number one. I didn't grab them all because, again, I've already done a book talk about this over the summer. You can go check it out on our YouTube channel. But these covers, I can't. They're so good. The Lunar Chronicles, Marissa Mayer. And then I'm Katie. If you missed it, I am obsessed with all things Sarah J. Maas. So obviously, A Court of Thorns and Roses had to pop up again in my top favorite list. Our main character, Feyre, accidentally kills a minion of the High King of the Spring Court, High Lord of the Spring Court. She doesn't know it until he comes to her house in the middle of winter and says, "Hey, you killed my best friend. I'm taking you captive as punishment for the rest of your life." Little does he know, she falls in love with somebody else, sets him free, sets her free, shenanigans ensue. It is a 3-book series. The books are kind of massive, but don't be intimidated. They're a quick read. The second book is called A Court of Mist and Fury, and the third book is called A Court of Wings and Ruin. They're a little bit racy, so I would say probably older middle school, high school kids for sure would read these. But there's romance, there's adventure, there's death, there's magic, there's bad guys, there's good guys, there's people you don't know if they're good guys or bad guys. We love this book series. Everything Sarah J. Maas has ever written is spectacular. I know my friend Heather talked about her other series, Throne of Glass, in a couple of book talks ago. So that is another series you should absolutely check out. Throne of Glass, Court of Thorns and Roses, pretty much anything Sarah J. Maas. We love it. All right. So I'm really excited about books. That's why I'm like out of breath. I'm like, we're book nerds, bibliophiles as we are. So my third book is called Moxie. We read this one together as a book club. Jennifer Matthew, I think that's how you say it, Matthew, wrote a book called Moxie, and it is about our main character. Her name is Vivian. Vivian lives in sort of small town America and starts to see the cracks in the facade of small town America, how good old boys get away with really whatever they want to. The football team is not really held accountable for their actions. Girls are sort of expected to either be popular cheerleaders or just be really quiet. And she's had enough. Vivian's over it. So Vivian discovers that her mom was in a punk rock band in the 90s, sort of structured after like the Riot Girl genre, and that her mom wrote a zine in the 90s. And so Vivian decides with her friends, and she starts to develop friends across the genres, if you will. She becomes friends with a popular cheerleader who was wronged at the hands of the football players. She gets the quiet kids. She gets the beautiful ones, the ugly ones. Everybody gets on board to help write this zine anonymously to start calling out the misogynistic BS that happens at her school. So the administration turns out to not like that. Fights ensue. And does Moxie win? Girls with Moxie probably win this novel, but you should check it out. So, Jennifer Mathew, Moxie. Look for this fantastic cover when you are looking for it at the store. Black and white, hot pink letters. You can't miss it. Okay, I cheated a little bit, and I'm actually doing my top 6 favorites. Sorry, not sorry. The first 2 are really short because I've already talked about them. You'll be fine. It's more options for you to pick a book over Christmas break. I don't know what to tell you. So, anyway, moving right along. My next 2 are a duology written by Lana Popovic, and it is a series called The Hibiscus Daughters, but it is a duology. The first one is the purple one called Wicked Like a Wildfire, and the second one is the tealish one called Fierce Like a Firestorm. So even if you don't remember what these books are called, take a look at these beautiful covers. This is for sure a book I picked up off the shelf because that cover is just gorgeous. So the series is about 2 sisters named Iris and Melina. And Iris and Melina live in a world where magic is kind of around, but not really. Iris and Melina have magic in their family. And one of them, Iris, is the sister who sort of sees colors and flowers in kaleidoscope vision. And Melina has the most magical, beautiful singing voice you'd ever, like it would make you weep if you heard her sing or play an instrument. So her mother, although wants to keep them safe, and squashes their magic pretty much. They get punished anytime they practice their magic. And so their mother gets killed by a mysterious white-haired witch-type woman. Turns out that woman is part of their family. And so Iris and Melina get sucked into this otherworldly historical trip through their family tree. They discover that their powers are not something to be afraid of. And, you know, there's a curse upon their family and they have to set out to break it, which all happens in book number 2. So I love this book particularly because it's got sort of a Czech Romanian feel to it. And we don't see that a whole lot in YA novels, especially ones that involve magic and fairy tales. So I thought that was pretty cool that it was set in sort of a different region in the world than we typically see. So Wicked Like a Wildfire, Fierce Like a Firestorm by Lana Popovic. This was her first book too. Fun fact, trivia of the night. So for my last 2, I'm going to have to present my screen because I don't have copies of these books anymore. I'm spreading the love, sharing books out to my friends. So my last 2 books of the evening are 2 books called, the first one is called Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse, who is also a local author. I believe she lives up northern New Mexico. And in Trail of Lightning, it is set in the not too distant future where there is a worldwide flood causing ridiculous, massive earthquakes. And so to save their nation, the Dinétah, the Navajo Nation, sort of walls themselves off and becomes a sort of sovereign entity unto themselves. There's a drought where they have walled themselves off. The big flood is the event that they call this. So our main character's name is Maggie, and Maggie is a member of the Navajo Nation. And on Maggie's 16th birthday, her grandmother, who she lived with her whole life, her grandmother is murdered. And so her grandmother, she finds out that her grandmother has been murdered by witches and monsters. So Maggie, in this act of horrific tragedy in her family, Maggie's powers that are attached to her clan or her family are activated. So in order to get control on these powers, she goes and seeks the help of this sort of entity, monster slayer. He's immortal. His name is Nezgani. And I apologize if I've mispronounced that. Please let me know, and I will do my best to pronounce it better next time. She falls in love with Nezgani, finds out he's not quite who he says he is, but he helps Maggie become a bounty hunter for monsters. Little does she know, she's going to start trying to figure out who murdered her grandmother, and she's not going to like the answer. There is a sequel to Trail of Lightning. It's called Storm of Locusts, set in the same world with the same sort of cast of characters. But Maggie is a badass woman. She is broken. She is recovering from the tragedy of losing her grandmother. She doesn't think she's a hero. She doesn't deserve forgiveness. And we love a broken hero, especially a woman anti-hero, broken sort of character, and even more, especially a woman of color, an indigenous person being the lead in this duology. So far, I'm not sure if Rebecca Roanhorse is going to write more of this. I would read everything in this book series if she did. 5 out of 5, fantastic, realistic, magical, badass women fighting monsters. Trail of Lightning. My last book I'm going to talk about today. Again, I'm sorry I'm so out of breath, but I'm so excited about all of these books. The last book I want to talk about tonight is a book called There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. There's Someone Inside Your House is about a young girl named Makani Young. And Makani has just moved from Hawaii to Ohio because of some ish that went down. It was an incident at school with some girls that they had to relocate to her family up in Ohio. However, some strange things. Oh, her parents passed away. I'm sorry. That's right at the beginning of the book. That's why she goes to live with her grandmother in Nebraska, not Ohio. She makes a couple friends. She's sort of the weird one out because she's Hawaiian. She doesn't quite look like everybody in Nebraska. And then some people at her school start to die. So it's a horror novel. Probably should have started this with that. But some people start to sneak into Makani's house. It might be Makani being the one. It might be the popular guy at school. We don't know. But as this novel increases in suspense and the tragedies and the horrific murders get more and more prominent in the story, what happened to Makani in Hawaii starts to come. We start to get revealed what happened to her and caused her to move up here. So murder, mayhem, girl power, fighting teenagers. That's what that one's about. Again, 5 out of 5. It's on my top list for a reason because I also love all things scary and spooky. So if you need a good spook, even though it's not Halloween season anymore, There's Someone Inside Your House is what I would recommend for you. So thanks everybody for making it this far into my book talk. And now I'm going to pass it over to my friend Adrienne.
Hi. So I had a really hard time cutting it down to 5. If I had known I could sneak a couple more in, like my friend Katie, I definitely would have. But so some of mine aren't necessarily YA books, but I think they would appeal to older students. I teach 11th and 12th grade, so I kind of always have that mindset. So my first, I went from 5 to 1. So my 5th favorite book of 2020 was Dear Edward by Ann Napolitano. I love this book so much. 12-year-old Edward is the sole survivor of a plane crash with his parents. Everyone on the plane dies except for him. It is kind of like a YA book because it's written in alternating chapters of his life after the plane crash, and then right before the plane crash, you get introduced to all the other people. You know they're going to die because obviously the plane crash happens right in the beginning. But it's really, really good. He finds a mysterious box of letters that he has gone to live with his aunt and uncle who don't have any kids. So that's, kind of a coming of age part there. And he goes to live with his aunt and uncle, and all the survivors, all the relatives of the survivors have been sending him letters for years because he was the last one to see their loved ones alive. And his uncle, feeling like he couldn't handle that, has just been kind of keeping the letters, and he stumbles across this box when he is a little bit older and starts to answer all the letters and visit some of the people. So it's actually really great. It was just kind of a unique perspective of YA and adult. It was an awesome book. It was a standalone novel that came out in January of 2020, but excellent. I would recommend it highly to anyone. And my number 4 was Lobizona by Romina Garber. I did already give a book talk about this, but I just love this book so much. She is an undocumented teenager who lives with her mother in Florida. She gets really sick once a month, and her mom kind of drugs her to get her through these horrible headaches and stomach aches that she has. She doesn't know it, but she is half human and half werewolf, and her mom knows it. And so she's been drugged. She gets drugged every month when the full moon comes out. So she won't come into her power. She ends up finding this magic school. All you guys know, I love anything set in a magic school because it takes me back to Harry Potter. She finds this magic school in the Everglades, kind of lies her way in. And in this magic school, all the girls are witches and all the boys are werewolves. So she's the first one. She's the only, half breed, they call her. and she is the only girl werewolf. At first, they put her with the other girls, and they can't figure out why she doesn't really have any power. And then they discover that she's a werewolf, and she's the first of her kind. She really struggles to kind of find her place and make friends, and it's just, I really, really loved it. I didn't think there would be a sequel because I couldn't find anything about a sequel, and even on Amazon it just says book 1, but I guess the author just came out recently and said that she is in the process of writing a sequel. So that's really cool. I think it's just going to be a duology, and it's probably going to come out in 2021, she said. So excellent. I would recommend it to anybody. Beautiful cover too. I love books that have great covers. 3, Ray Bear by Jordan Ufuko. I again talked about this. It seems like my last books that I've read are the ones I remember the most. I loved this book. Again, kind of this like not really magic school, but she grows up with this she grows up by herself with all these servants, and this woman, her mother, all the servants called the lady, visits her about once a month, and kind of trains her, gives her all these different skills, and she's sent to the capital of the empire. There's 11 different countries in this world, which is kind of based on Africa, and they will choose the crown prince, who's 11 also. They'll choose one child from each of the countries surrounding the empire to be chosen one of the crown prince's council of 11, and they live with him the rest of their lives. And they actually have these kind of like spiritual gifts where they can communicate with each other, and they all have individual gifts too, like healing. One's a healer, one's a fighter. So she finally finds her family. She doesn't realize, though, that the lady has embedded a compulsion in her that when she finally gains the crown prince's trust, that she's going to kill him. So she keeps feeling kind of these weird feelings about, I don't know why I want to hurt him. Why would I want to hurt him? I love him, and love like a brother. They're all kind of this like big brother and sister family. It's just a really unique perspective. And so it's kind of like how they fight with each other, and how she kind of tries to overcome. You get more of the lady's backstory, and it's just fascinating. It was a great read. Loyalty, fate, the lengths that she's willing to go to not hurt the crown prince. It's just really good. I don't know if there's going to be, it left on a point where it could have wound up having a sequel, but it would be fine as a standalone. So I'm not sure if there's going to be another one or not. So, and number 2, I can't remember what it is, Katie. Oh, Mistborn. Okay, this is my only one that did not come out in 2020, but I love this book so much. I read it for an online book group that I'm in. I don't know if you've ever read any Brandon Sanderson, but he has a lot of books set in this world. So this one is the first one it's a set of trilogies, and it's the first one in this, the first trilogy, and it's called The Final Empire. And Mistborn is the name of the whole trilogy. And so for 1,000 years, the Lord Rulers reigned over the Ska, which are the servants. There's like the upper class and then the poverty-stricken Ska. There's really no middle class in this world, with absolute power and terror. It's kind of a real dreary kind of world. Ash rains all the time, and all the plants are brown. There's no books or anything like that. So there's this man named Kelsier who is in prison, and his wife is killed. And when he's thrown into prison fighting, he ends up being so angry that he discovered he's a Mistborn. Then all the nobility have one power of allomancy, like one can go, persuade others to do what they want. One is a calming, one is invisibility. But a Mistborn has all the different powers. And so he finds out that he's half elite, and he is a Mistborn. So he has this crazy plan to overthrow the Lord Ruler, which is pretty much doomed. He gets this kind of band of kind of the rejects of society, but they each have their own power, and they kind of have this adopted half ska orphan named Vin. She doesn't trust anyone, and they discover she's a Mistborn also. So this is the first book in a series within a larger series, but it's so good. I recommend it highly. I give it a 6 out of 5. It's a beautiful world. And then last one, and I'm not going to talk about this one a lot because we've mentioned this over and over and over. My best book of 2020 was Crescent City, the first Crescent City one, which is called House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. We all love Sarah J. Maas. Bryce Quinlan, she's half fae, half human, and pretty soon after the book opens, her best friend is killed by a demon, and she is seeking revenge. So the whole book is kind of her, story of how she bands with this archangel and goes after the demon who killed her friend. It's, we've talked about this so much, I don't want to just go over and over it, but it is the best book I read in 2020. And I have one more slide really quick, just kind of my runners up. If anyone ever wants to know about any of these books, they can, these were the ones that I couldn't fit on my list, but they were all really, really good. So hopefully that'll be up on the thing. So, and now I'm sending it over to my friend Misty.
Hello, everyone. So I am going to share a screen because, I was a little bit shamed last week that people did these PowerPoints and I hadn't done anything. And so my friend Katie was like, oh, well, I have all the books. Yeah, I have all the books too, but this was a lot of books that I'm going to talk about because I did do my top 5 of all time. However, my first set of my top 5 of all time, it's really 12 books. So I'm just going to go ahead and say it because it was Court of Thorn and Roses that Katie talked about. And then I have the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. And so these are in no particular order of my favorites, but these are books that I absolutely adore. So even though it's my top 5 of all time, this really is these 2 series I love. I cannot say how much I love it. It's just like you can't comprehend how much I love these books. I personally like Court of Thorns and Roses more. My friend Heather Bassett really likes Throne of Glass more. And so I'm kind of like torn. Court of Thorns and Roses, though, I do. I like me some Reese in that. He's pretty good. So my next book, and I'm not going to talk much about it because Heather did a book talk about it a few weeks ago, The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender. Absolutely love this book. It's like one of those I read every other year, and I just reread it last year. But it is about Ava Lavender, and it's somewhat of a multi-generational story, and Ava is born with wings. And it's her story of how she's isolated in her home with her mother and her grandmother and her brother, and then what happens to her when she does get out of the house. It's a beautiful story. It's one of those, I'm not quite sure it's published as YA. I really do think it's published more as adult, but I think it would really connect to some young readers. It's heartbreaking. I read it, the first time I read it, my grandmother had just passed away and I was finishing it. And it's just the story of mothers and daughters and grandmothers and granddaughters. And maybe that's why it has just struck a chord with me for all this time. It's also one of those few books that my friend Heather and I actually agree on because we have different tastes. And this is one that she actually recommended to me and was like, I think you might like it, even though it's not really your genre. And I'll be honest, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. My next, I'm going to take you back to a little bit of old school because when talking about my top 5 of all time, maybe I'm just older than everybody in this group, but thinking about it, I mean, I've been reading YA for a really long time. And I mean, I was reading YA before it became like its own section in a bookstore type YA. And one of the first books that I read, it is marked as one of the first books that when it was published, it started this YA genre because of the audience it was really written to. And that's The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. The Outsiders has tons of different copies. This is the copy that I had. I was in third grade when I first read this book. I know, it's kind of crazy. But I was in third grade when I read the book, and the movie was coming out. And so I love it. I mean, that's Pony Boy on the top. It's just, and then there's Cherry Valance. Awesome book. Some of you might have actually read it in school, but then again, you might have read it in school and you really didn't. It's really good. It takes place in the 60s in Oklahoma. So it's one of those stories about a bunch of guys coming of age and the problems that they go through and how it affects them. The one thing I do remember about this book is when I moved, my dad was in the military, I was an Army brat. And so when we moved at the beginning of 7th grade, I moved from Arizona to Maryland. And we packed up our car and my parents were like, grab a book. So I took The Outsiders with me. And then we were stuck in on-base guest housing, which is basically a hotel, for almost a month. And then when we got in our house, we didn't have furniture for a while. And so I had The Outsiders, and I probably read it over and over and over. I read it with my students when I taught middle school. It's like the first paragraph, I had it memorized. When I stepped out into the bright sunshine from the darkness of the movie house, I had two things on my mind: Paul Newman and A Ride Home. I love it. And it's kind of a pop culture thing now too. When people say stay gold, Pony Boy, stay gold, totally from The Outsiders. Harkens back to Robert Frost's poem, Nothing Gold Can Stay. My next series, it's actually a time quintet, which is 5 books by Madeleine L'Engle, and really it's only the first 3 that I really dig. The last 2, not so much. But Wrinkle in Time, again, takes me back to when I was in 6th grade and read it, and then we read A Wind in the Door. We read both of those in my 6th grade English class, and I just adore the stories. The story of Meg Murray, and she's a high schooler, and her coming of age, finding her way. Her parents are both brilliant scientists. Her dad has been missing though for a while. She has a younger brother, Charles Wallace, who is like that super smart genius 5-year-old. And so Meg gets in fights at school a lot because she sticks up for Charles Wallace. She doesn't like her principal. She meets Calvin O'Keefe, the boy down the road, and goes to school with him. And they go on this epic adventure. There's been a couple of movies made about Wrinkle in Time. I'm not sure I'm going to recommend them though. Maybe you shouldn't watch them. There was a graphic novel adaptation of Wrinkle in Time, and I thought that was really good. Wind in the Door continues the story with Charles Wallace, and he's really sick, and so they have to take a journey into his mitochondria, and it's sci-fi and fantasy blended together in these. And I just remember always, the Tesseract. And if you read the books, you'll know what I'm talking about. Swiftly Tilting Planet really focuses on the 2 twin brothers of Meg Murray and Charles Wallace. And Meg is a little bit older at that point, and it's about Sandy and Dennis. It's not my favorite, but those 3 I think really kind of connect in this time quintet. And then my last book series that I absolutely adore, it's the Twilight Saga. And I read these books because a student when I was teaching 8th grade was reading Twilight, and she absolutely loved it. And she was like, hey, you should really read this. And I was like, oh, we'll see. And so I read it, and my daughter was still in middle school at the time. And by the time New Moon, the 2nd book, came out, I had introduced my daughter, Ashley, to the Twilight series. And she read all of them. I think that's why Twilight really sticks out to me, is because my daughter was not a reader, but yet she read all of the Twilight Saga. She'd like devoured them. And then she went on to read Harry Potter. So I think that's one of the reasons. And I think I'm just a a 17-year-old girl at heart. I mean, I do. And it's totally Team Edward all the way. So whatever. And I really did like the most recent adaptation of Midnight Sun. And they stand out. So you know what? Don't let anybody ever tell you that the book that you think is your favorite is bad, or, oh my God, that book, the writing is so horrible, or it sucks, or anything. Don't let anybody tell you that, because you know what? You're the reader. You're the one who determines your favorites. And you know what? And as my friend Steve Penzone just said in the chat, everyone has their own tastes. And so that's one thing. And even if you are in class and your English teacher seems to get a little pretentious about, oh my God, you're reading this? Don't you back down. You be like, yeah, aren't you happy I'm reading? Because ultimately, isn't that our goal? Is just to read and to enjoy it. So I do have a special guest in my office with me, and I think she is going to take over.
Oh,
and
I am?
Well, she's going to talk about one of her books. I'm not sure she has a book with her.
I am.
It's just, spur of the moment. But here I pass it on to my friend Heather
Well,
Bassett.
I would have to Google the cover of my book. I don't have it with me. I just finished a book. I don't have a top 5. I can't even think that far ahead. But I did just finish a book called The How and the Why by Cynthia Hand. And it was recommended because it was a read-alike for Far From the Tree, which we know I love and I cry about when I talk about. So The How and the Why is another kind of adoption story. And the girl wants to find her birth parents. She's a junior in high school. Her mom is in the hospital. She has awaiting a heart transplant. She's a drama kid, so she's in plays. Oh, thank you, Katie. So there's the book, The How and the Why, and it's it takes place in Idaho, which is interesting because when I was little, I lived in Idaho, and the high school that they go to, Bonneville High School. My oldest sister went to that high school for a short time, so it was weird, but. It's a really good, she meets a really good new guy friend who moves into their high school. They're all in drama together. And she's kind of on this journey to find her birth mom, and her adopted mom and dad are really supportive of it. And, her mom, who's adopted her, her mother is, awaiting a heart transplant and says, I want to find her too. I want to talk to her. I want her to know what kind of life you've had. So I think it's a really good story. It's kind of, it's a good friendship story, good coming of age story. And I liked it. That's it. And that's good enough for me. I heard Misty say it. It's just, if it's good enough for you, it's good enough.
See, that's all that really matters. And so that's it. And I don't think we're coming back for another month. I think I would tell you the date, but I don't know the date. It's 4 weeks from today. So mark it on your calendar, peeps. Figure it out. But do get some reading done over the holiday, over the break. Stay off the computers. Pick up a book and actually read it if you want. I mean, but if you dig reading on an electric tablet or a computer, you do that too. You do you. Just read. Just keep it going. And also, don't forget, on Christmas Eve in Iceland, it is a tradition to give books on Christmas Eve, and then you spend the night in your pajamas reading your book on Christmas Eve. So I'm just saying,
I used to do that.
you maybe should do that. See, I spend every night in my pajamas reading a book. So see how it works. So we wish you a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, a Merry Kwanzaa, good old winter solstice. I hope Krampus doesn't come get any of you. And I hope you've all been really good. But have a great break, and we will see you in 4 weeks.
Happy New Year! Goodbye!
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays!
Bye, everybody.